please join me in welcoming Dean Erwin Chemerinsky to the stage. Erwin, thank you for being here. I'd like to start on the questioning, speaking about speech, to talk a little bit about the First Amendment. You say in the 2017 book that it's indispensable, and I wonder if you could just take us through that and why you say it in that way.
Think about why universities exist. Universities exist to advance knowledge, and that comes through faculty, research, and scholarship. Universities exist to teach students, to impart knowledge, but also to ask students to question and explore ideas. You can't achieve any of that without free speech. The opposite of free speech would be to have a government or a university say, these are the accepted ideas, only these can be taught. Well, how could faculty engage in innovative research? How could students be taught to question without that?
So what about limits to the First Amendment?
As we all know, free speech isn't absolute. And the Supreme Court, at least since the 1940s, has said there's categories of speech that are unprotected. There's no right to engage in incitement of illegal activity. There's no right to threaten people. There's no right to use speech to harass people. All of these reflect competing values. And I think one of the hardest things when one studies First Amendment law is how to deal with those competing values. If speech had no effect, we wouldn't be here and protecting it as a fundamental right. But the effects can be good or the effects can be bad.
I wonder if you could sort of define First Amendment, define academic freedom as independent of First Amendment, and then maybe talk a little bit about those parts of either of those sets that are independent and parts that overlap.
Academic freedom is about especially the ability of faculty members to engage in their research, in their teaching, the dissemination of ideas without being sanctioned for the content of the speech. It's certainly not absolute any more than free speech is absolute. Faculty members have to meet professional standards. If a geology professor would go into class and teach that it's a flat earth, that's not protected by academic freedom. If a 20th century European historian would be a Holocaust denier in scholarship and teaching, that's not going to be protected by academic freedom.
We haven't talked about hate speech.
The most frequent question I get when I'm talking about the First Amendment is, where is the line between free speech and hate speech? What I always say is, that's a false distinction. The Supreme Court has been clear that hate speech is generally protected by the First Amendment. In the early 1990s, 360 colleges and universities adopted hate speech codes. Everyone to come to court, without exception, was declared unconstitutional, almost always being too vague, too overbroad. But I think most of all in the United States, hate speech is protected because it expresses an idea, a vile idea, a deeply offensive idea, but it's still an idea. And the core of academic freedom, just because there's a First Amendment right to say something, doesn't mean it should be said. That I would hope that the students would treat one another with civility, with respect, and even with kindness.
I'm going to take these. This one is from a student. If current laws like the First Amendment were no longer a constraint, how would that change your advice to universities on regulating speech?
My basic premise is that the principles of free speech that are necessary for a university are the same whether it is a public university or a private university. And so I would argue, if there were no First Amendment, for the same basic principles, because that's why I say they should apply to private universities. I want them to apply to private universities, not because it's the First Amendment, but because I think it's essential to the functioning.
Well, I want to thank you. This is really wonderful. Thank you for coming all this way,
Thank you.
spending time with us.
Thank you. Thank you.